Now Elisha had said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, "Move away, you and your household, and stay wherever you can, because Adonai has called for a famine, and it will be on the land for 7 years." The woman acted at once and did as the man of God had said. She went with her household and stayed in the land of the Plishtim for 7 years. At the end of 7 years, the woman returned from the land of the Plishtim and sought an audience with the king to claim her house and land. The king was talking with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God. "Tell me," he said, "all great things Elisha has done," just as he was telling the king how he had restored a dead person to life. At that very moment, the woman whose son he had restored to life came to the king with her claim for her house and land. Gehazi said, "My lord, king, this is the woman, and this is her son, the one Elisha restored to life." On being asked by the king, the woman verified it. At this, the king appointed a special officer and charged him, "Restore everything that belongs to her, including the income her fields have produced from the day she left them until now." Elisha went to Damascus. Ben-Hadad, the king of Aram, was ill, and he was told, "The great man of God has come here." The king said to Hazael, "Take with you a gift. Go meet the man of God and consult Adonai through him. Ask if I will recover from this illness." Hazael went to meet him, taking with him a gift that included everything good Damascus had, 40 camel loads. He came, stood before him and said, "Your son Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, has sent me to you. He asks, will I recover from this illness?" Elisha answered, "Go and say to him, you will surely recover, even though Adonai has shown me that you will surely die." Then the man of God fixed his gaze on him for so long that Hazael became embarrassed. Finally, Elisha began to cry. Hazael asked, "Why is my lord crying?" He answered, "Because I know the disaster you will bring on the people of Israel. You will set their fortresses on fire, and you will kill their young men with the sword. You will dash their little ones to pieces and rip their pregnant women apart." Hazael said, "But what is your servant? Nothing but a dog? How could he do anything of such magnitude?" Elisha answered, "Adonai has shown me that you will be king over Aram." Then he left Elisha and returned to his master, who asked him, "What did Elisha say to you?" "He told me how you will surely recover." The next day he took a blanket, dipped it in water, and spread it on his face so that he died, and Hazael took his place as king. It was when Joram, the son of Ahav, king of Israel, was in his 5th year of his reign, that Jeroboam, the son of Jehoshaphat, began his rule over Yehuda. He was 32 years old when he began to rule, and he ruled 8 years in Jerusalem. He lived after the example of the king of Israel, as did the house of Achav, because he was married to Achav's daughter. He did what was evil from Adonai's perspective. However, Adonai was unwilling to destroy Yehuda because his servant David, inasmuch he had promised to give him and his children a lamp that would burn forever. During this time, Edom revolted against Yehuda and set up its own king. In response, Joram crossed to Zari with all his chariots. At night, he and his chariot commanders set out and attacked Edom, who had surrounded him. Then the people fled to their tents. Nevertheless, since that day, Edom has remained free of Yehudans' domination. Leva revolted on the same day. Other activities of Joram and all his accomplishments are recorded in the annals of the king of Yehuda. Joram slept with his ancestors and was buried with his ancestors in the city of David. And Ahaziah, his son, took his place as king. It was in the 12th year of Joram, the son of Ahav, king of Israel, that Ahaziah, the son of Joram, king of Yehuda, began to reign. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he began to rule, and he ruled for 1 year in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Athaliah, the daughter of Omri, king of Israel. He lived after the example of the house of Ahav. He did what was evil from Adonai's perspective, as had the house of Ahav, for his son-in-law, the house of Ahav. For he was the son-in-law in the house of Ahav. With Joram, the son of Ahav, he went to war against Hazael, king of Aram, at Ramoth Gilead, and the Aramim wounded Joram. King Joram returned to Israel to be healed of the wounds which Aramim had inflicted on him in Ramah while fighting Hazael, king of Aram. Ahaziah, the son of Joram, king of Yehuda, went down to visit Joram, the son of Ahav, in Israel, because he was not feeling well. Elisha the prophet summoned one of the Gilead prophets and said to him, "Prepare for traveling, take this flask of oil in your hand and go to Ramoth Gilead. When you get there, look for Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi. Enter, have him step away from his companions and take him to an inside room. Then take the flask of oil, pour it on his head, and say, 'This is what Adonai says. I have anointed you king of Israel.' After that, open the door and get away from there as fast as you can." So the young prophet left for Ramoth Gilead. When he arrived, he found the senior army officer sitting there. He said, "I have a message for you, Commander." Jehu asked, "For which one of us?" "For you, Commander," he said. Jehu got up and went to the house. Then the prophet poured the oil on his head and said to him, "This is what Adonai, the God of Israel, says. I have anointed you king over the people of Adonai over Israel. You will attack the house of Ahav, your master, so that I can avenge the blood of my servants, the prophets, and all the servants of Adonai, bloodshed by Isabel. The entire house of Ahav will perish. I will cut off from Ahav every male, whether slave or free, in Israel. I will make the house of Ahav like the house of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha, the son of Ahiah. Moreover, the dogs will eat Isabel in the dumping ground of Israel, and there will be no one to bury her." Then he opened the door and fled. Jehu returned to the servants of his lord, and one of them said to him, "Is everything all right? Why did this crazy person come to you?" He answered them, "You know the king and how they babble? They said, 'You're being evasive. Come on, tell us the truth.' Then he said, 'This is exactly what he said to me and how he said it. Here is what Adonai says. I have anointed you king over Israel.' At this, they hurried each one to take his cloak and put it under Jehu at the top of the stairs. Then they blew the shofar and proclaimed, 'Jehu is king.' Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, formed a conspiracy against Joram. At the time, Joram was guarding Ramoth Gilead, he and all Israel, because Hazael, king of Aram. But Joram himself had returned to Israel to recover from the wounds Aram had afflicted on him when fighting Hazael, king of Aram. "If you agree," said Jehu, "then don't allow anyone to leave town, and take the news to Israel." So Jehu, riding in a chariot, went to Israel, for Joram was laid up there. Ahaziah, king of Yehuda, had come down to visit Joram. The lookout, standing on the watchtower in Israel, saw Jehu's troops approaching and said, "I see some troops coming." Joram said, "Have a horseman go to meet him and ask, 'Are you coming in peace?'" So a man on horseback went to meet him and said, "The king asked if you were coming in peace." Jehu answered, "Peace? What business is that of yours? Turn around and get behind me." The watchman reported the messengers reached them, but he isn't coming back. So he sent out a second man on horseback who, on coming to him, said, "The king asked if you're coming in peace." Jehu answered, "Peace? What business that is of yours? Turn around and get behind me." The watchman reported he reached them, but he isn't coming back. Also, it looks like the driving of Yehu Nimshi's grandson, he's driving like a maniac. Harness my chariot, ordered Yoram. They got it ready. Then Yoram, king of Israel, and Ahaziah, king of Yehuda, each in his chariot, went out to meet Yehu. They met him in the field of Navot the Yisraeli. When Yoram saw Yehu, he said, "Are you coming in peace, Yehu?" He answered, "Peace? Your mother Isabel continuing all her cult prostitution and witchcraft? What a question!" Yoram wheeled around and fled, shouting, "Treachery! Achazah!" Yehu drew his bow with all his strength and struck Yoram between the shoulder blades. An arrow went through his heart and he collapsed in his chariot. "Pick him up," said Yehu to Bidkar, his servant, "and throw him into the field of Nabat the Yisraeli. For remember how, when you and I were riding together, after Achav, his father, Adonai pronounced this sentence against him? Adonai says, 'Yesterday I saw the blood of Nabat and the blood of his sons.' Adonai also says, 'I will pay you back in this field. Therefore, pick him up and throw him in the field,' in keeping with what Adonai said." But when Ahaziah, the king of Yehuda, saw this, he fled on the rope past Beit Hagan. Yehu pursued him and ordered, "Strike him and kill him. Strike him too in his chariot." So they struck him at the Gur ascent near Yevalim. He fled to Megiddo, but there he died. His servants carried him in a chariot to Jerusalem, buried him in the tomb of his ancestors in the city of David. It was in the 11th year of Joram, the son of Achav, that Ahaziah had begun his rule over Yehuda. When Yehu reached Israel and Isabel heard of it, she put eye makeup on, fixed her hair, and looked out the window. As Yehu came through the city gate, she asked, "Are you here in peace? You Zimri, you murderer of your master?" Looking up in the window and said, "Who is on my side?" "Who?" 2 or 3 officers looked out toward him. He said, "Throw her down." So they threw her down. Some of her blood splashed onto the wall and the horses and trampled underfoot. He went in, ate and drank, and then said, "Deal with this accursed woman, bury her, because she's a king's daughter." They went to bury her, but found no more of her than her skull, feet, and hands. So they came back and told him. He said, "This is what Adonai said through his servant Eliyahu from Tishbe. In the field of the Israel dogs will eat the flesh of Isabel. Isabel's corpse in the field of Israel will be like dung on the ground, unrecognizable as Isabel." There were 70 descendants of Achav in Shimron. Yehu wrote letters and sent them to Shimron, to the rulers of Israel, to the leaders, and to the guardians of the Achav's sons. The letter said, "You have with you your master's sons, also chariots and horses, as well as fortified cities and armor. So as soon as this letter reaches you, choose the best and most suitable of your master's sons. So set him on his father's throne and fight for your master's dynasty." They were panic-stricken and said, "If the other 2 kings couldn't withstand him, how will we?" So the administrators of the palace, the governor of the city, the leaders, the children's guardians, sent the message to Yehu, "We are your servants. We will do everything you ask us to. We won't appoint anyone king. Do as you see fit." He wrote a second letter to them, which said, "If you are on my side, and if you are ready to obey my orders, then bring the heads of your master's sons to me in Israel by this time tomorrow." Now the 70 sons of the king were in the prominent men who raised them. When the letter reached them, they seized the king's sons and killed them, all 70 of them, and put their heads in baskets and sent them to Yehu in Israel. The messenger came and told him, "They have brought the heads of the king's sons." He said, "Leave them in 2 piles at the entrance of the city gate until morning." When morning came, he sent out, stood before the people, and said, "You are not responsible for the deaths of these men. Yes, I conspired against my master and killed him. But who killed all these? Understand, then, that no part of Adonai's word which Adonai spoke concerning the dynasty of Achav falls to the ground, because Adonai has done what he said through his servant Eliyahu." So Yehu killed everyone who remained from the house of Achav in Yisrael. all his leading men, his close friends, and his Kohanim, until not one of them was left alive. Then he set out and went to Shamron. On the way he reached a shearing shed for shepherds, where he encountered relatives of Ahaziah, king of Yehuda. "Who are you?" he asked. "We're relatives of Hezekiah," they answered. "We're going down to pay our respects to the families of the king and the queen mother." "Take them alive," said Yehu. They took them alive, 42 men, slaughtered them, and threw them in the shepherd shed's pit. He spared not one of them. On leaving there, he happened upon Yonadav, the son of Rechav, coming toward him. He greeted him and said, "Are you wholeheartedly with me, as I am with you?" "Yes," answered Yonadav. "If so, give me your hand." He gave me his hand, and Yehu took him up into the chariot. He said, "Come with me and see how zealous I am for Adonai." So they had him ride in his chariot. On arriving in Shamron, he put to death everyone that Ahav still had in Shamron, until he had destroyed him, in keeping with the word of Adonai which he had spoken to Eliyahu. Next, Yehu assembled all the people and said to him, "Ahav serves Baal in limited measure, but Yehu will serve him with full zeal. Therefore summon all the prophets of Baal to me, all his worshippers and all his priests. None of them is to be missing, because I am going to offer a great sacrifice to Baal. Whoever is missing will not remain alive." But Yehu was setting a trap in order to destroy the worshippers of Baal. Yehu said, "Proclaim a solemn assembly for Baal," and they did so. Yehu sent throughout all Israel, and all the worshippers of Baal came, so that there were not one man left that didn't come. They entered the temple of Baal, and the temple of Baal was filled with one end to the other. To the men in charge of the wardrobe, he said, "Bring out the robes for all the worshippers of Baal." He brought out the clothes. Yehu and Yehonadab, the son of Rechav, entered the house of Baal and said to the worshippers of Baal, "Search to see that none of the servants of Adonai is here with you, only worshippers of Baal." Then they went in to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. But Yehu had chosen 80 men to remain outside. He said, "If any of the men I'm about to put in your hands escapes, it will be your life for his." As soon as he had finished offering the burnt offerings, Yehu said to the guards and officers, "Go in and kill them. Don't let one of them get out." So they killed them with the sword. Then, after the guards and officers had thrown out their bodies outside, they went into the temple of Baal's inner shrine, brought out the pillars of the temple of Baal, and burned them. Finally, they broke down Baal's standing stone and demolished the temple of Baal, converting it into a latrine, which it is still today. Thus Yehu rid Israel of Baal. However, Yehu did not turn away from the sins of Yerovam, the son of Nebat, with which he had led Israel into sin, the gold calves that were in the Beit El and Dan. Adonai said to Yehu, because you did well in accomplishing what is right from my perspective, and have done to the house of Ahav everything that was in my heart, your descendants down to the 4th generation will sit on the throne of Israel. But Yehu made no effort to live wholeheartedly according to the Torah of Adonai, the God of Israel, and did not turn away from the sins of Yerovam with which he had led Israel into sin. It was during the period that Adonai began to dismember Israel. Hazael attacked them throughout the territory of Israel, east on the Yarden, all the land of Gilad, the Gedi, the Reuveni, the Manasseh, from Aror by the Aran River, including Gilad and Bashan. Other activities, Yehu and all his accomplishments and all his power are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel. Yehu slept with his ancestors, and they buried him in Shamron. Then Yoahaz, his son, became king in his place. Yehu ruled over Israel in Shamron for 28 years.